10 years ago, I had a printout pinned to a notice board in my office of the top 20 reasons why tech startups fail, and the number one reason on that list why startups fail was poor product market fit. If you look at the same list today, you get the same reason at the top, poor product market fit. Even the other items on those lists relate back to poor product market fit. Run out of money? Well, maybe you ran out of money before you found product market fit. It always has been poor product market fit. It always will be poor product market fit. It is poor product market fit. How then, when designing your MVP, do you not spend all your money on a product that ultimately has poor product market fit? So here's what we're going to do. 1, we're going to define product market fit. 2, we're going to look at how you run your MVP project so that you converge on product market fit and do this first time. And 3, we're going to look at how pilot projects affect your ability to get your MVP to have good product market fit. 1. What is product market fit? The actual definition of product market fit is quite dense, but the way I like to look at it is, does this pass the so what test? If you put the product in front of a customer, how do they respond? Do they seem to like the idea, or do they kind of look at it askew with a sort of okay and attitude? Do they fully channel their internal surly teenager? I was going to put in the script, we've all seen what it's like when you see something for sale and it doesn't pass the so what test. Now I wonder whether this is a survivorship bias thing. For example, if you go out to your local shopping centre, anything that you can see for sale in the public domain likely does pass the so what test, because in order for a product to be visible to you in the market, product market fit would have to have been proven. At least that's true of large retailers. We've all seen examples of smaller retail businesses that have popped up and then shuttered quite quickly because what they were selling didn't quite make sense. You might personally not like the new Tesla or the new iPhone or the new Oppenheimer movie or that new seasonal coffee they're selling in Costa, but someone is buying them because the companies behind them have proven to an extent product market fit. In my time working as a CTO for nearly 30 years, I will say that I've seen more bad ideas than good, and a lot of founders don't work through this so what issue well enough. The question could be quite multidimensional as well. You may have a product that the actual end users love and does pass the so what test for them, in that they think it's cool and they like using it, but for some reason it does not pass the so what test for people who actually have to sign off on the thing and buy it. This can happen a lot when selling into large corporates, where a product tests well with the user base, but management don't see the point and don't want to buy it. If you're in a position where what you do for a living involves you seeing a lot of ideas go past you like plates on a sushi conveyor, e.g. you're an investor or someone who works with a lot of early stage businesses, you can get quite good at intuiting the answer to a so what test. It can be hard though if you're a founder to look at your product dispassionately, because if we have an idea we naturally assume it's amazing and can get carried away building something that ultimately turns out not to have great product market fit. Finding product market fit is a process of experimentation, which will come on in the next section, but let's just bullet out the general shape of what product market fit is. It is 1. User satisfaction. Do users actually like using the product? A good metric of this is, would they tell someone else that this was cool? Another is, does it become habit forming but in a good way, i.e. does it become part of the user's workflow as a net positive? Net promoter scores, or what's called instrumentation within the product, i.e. where the product phones home and gives an indication of how it's being used, can indicate whether user satisfaction is where you want it. 2. Minimal churn. Most technology businesses look to sell things on a monthly recurring basis, also known as an MRR or monthly recurring revenue basis. MRR is great for cash flow, but it invites the customer to think each month whether what they're buying has value for them, i.e. each month they get this little reminder to think about the bill, as opposed to in the olden days when you'd have a larger upfront purchase that you need to make peace with, but could largely forget about the spend thereafter. A high churn rate indicates that the customers are re-evaluating the value they get from your product each month, and they're finding it lacking, and then they're cancelling their subscriptions. A lower churn indicates better product market fit. Number 3 is minimal competitive pressure. Now it's a weird one this, because you never want to be in a market with no competition, as it implies there's no market, but what you want is a position where users don't jump ship to competitors because what you have works for them. This is about building an effective moat around your offering. 4. Commercial growth. The best indicator that you have product market fit is that the business is growing. You're able to more effectively address more of the market month by month and get people to buy. However, be careful of the tail wagging the dog here. You can have a product that is genuinely great but have no idea how to sell it, i.e. it feels there's no product market fit because you can't access your market. The general rule is that if the product market fit is good and the marketing tactics guided by a good marketing strategy are applied consistently, you will make sales and see growth. 2. MVP outsourcing and product market fit. At this point you have an idea idea and you need to produce a piece of software that implements that idea, whether that's an app, a website, or a portal. As a non-technology founder, you're going to have to find someone to build that software. You're also going to have to find somewhere between £70,000, £100,000 to pay for it. You're going to have to find an outsourced software development company to give the work to. And I have other videos on my channel about how to do this. However, I'm on a one-person mission to try and solve a massive problem in the startup community, which is that most non-technology founders that try to outsource their software will fail. Outsourcing software is a specialist activity that, to all intents and purposes, requires a technical co-founder or senior technical leader, like a CTO within the business, to manage the outsourcing partner. You know how when you watch Grand Designs and the owners try to do the project management themselves and end up being £200,000 over budget and build the house upside down, whereas if they'd spent 50 grand on a project manager, they wouldn't have wasted £200,000 and can have the house they wanted right way up. It's that. It can be done, but as I say, my mission is to teach non-technology founders like you in my audience how to outsource software without having that technical input. The general shape of the problem is that software projects don't work like other projects. Let's imagine you want to start up a business. For example, you want to build a drive-through bagel shop. In the real world, this is a simple undertaking. You find some land, you ask an architect to design the building, you get some input about how to set the space up properly, but realistically, the parameters are very constrained. There has to be somewhere to park, cars need to be able to drive around the building and make and collect orders, the staff will need to be able to move product around within our kitchen in order to hand the finished goods to people in the store and people at the drive-through window. It's static, it's contained and constrained by physics. Software projects don't work like that. All software projects like trying to build castles in the sky out of fairy dust and wishes just using your mind and the power of positive thinking. There are no physical constraints. There's absolute freedom when it comes to building software, which is fantastic because it makes it the most amazing thing in the world to do, and software lets people genuinely change the world. But that lack of constraints makes it 1,000 times easier to make ridiculous mistakes, and from those mistakes, build something that no one wants. To try and tie the analogy together, in the software world, you could build a drive-through where the drive-through lane was 1,000 feet up in the sky, only accessible to wizards flying unicorns, and it would work 100% great if you were a wizard riding a flying unicorn, but perhaps there aren't enough unicorn riding wizards in the local area who like bagels to make the business a success. That is a good parallel of poor product market fit when it comes to software engineering. You build something because you can, but ultimately you can't find anyone to be your customers. And pity the future version of me who this afternoon has to find all the B-roll footage of wizards and unicorns to edit into this video, but let's see how we go. To ground this a bit more, the problem with commissioning software is that it looks like you're commissioning something like a traditional construction project, but finding product market fit is an experimental process that cuts against the grain of how traditional construction projects work. Software agencies want the project designed and run up front as if it is a traditional construction project, but you can't possibly know what you want to build up front because that's how software works. You don't know what you're building until you've built it. This is actually where we get the idea of MVPs from. MVPs come from a book published in 2012 called The Lean Startup. This book has been so successful that it spawned a movement, and now all startup businesses operate on the principles in this book. But to understand the principles, we need to understand the history. Back in the day, the way that technology businesses would pop into existence is that someone would have an idea, ask a software team to develop it, and that software team would take the stairs into the basement, build some software, not talk to anyone, and emerge blinking into the light 6 to 9 months later, only to find out the customer hated what they built. The problem for the new business was that they had then spent all the money and got nothing usable. The developers had lots of fun, however. Effectively, people were building holiday camps for software developers, which was only good news for the software developers. The lean startup approach dictates that more experimentation is required, that rather than disappearing off and not talking to a customer before the money was spent, you build a bit, show the customer, listen to what they said, build a bit more, show the customer, rinse and repeat. The MVP approach proposed in the lean startup is highly compatible with the need to experiment in order to discover product market fit. It's easy to conflate the two principles into the same thing, and to an extent you should. So let's try and work this through as an example. Software outsourcing agencies exist purely to augment existing teams, i.e. they work best when the customer is a technology business with its own software developers and they need a bit of extra resource. What happens with non-technology founders is that they have to use outsourced software agencies as their whole team, which is unnatural to how the agencies need to work. But anyway, you better bet they're going to take your money regardless, because they will. You will go to the agency and tell them you want to build a bagel drive-thru, and they will say to you, okay, cool, we've built a few bagel drive-thrus before. We know what we're doing. They'll ask you a few questions about what you're trying to do, and they'll come back to you with a specification, which is the design for what will be built along with a quote. You pay them the money and off they go. There are then two ways in which this can go. You would be quite unlucky to engage a company that was just useless, which I'm defining here as spending all the money, taking all the time, and not coming back with anything at all. Most likely you will get something that looks like the agreed specification in return for your spend, but this is where the problems start. You drive to the site of your new bagel drive-thru and it looks amazing. The staff know what they're doing, the signage is on point, everything's looking really good, the bagels look really tasty. You invite a few customers and the very first one that turns up says, hey, where can I hitch my unicorn? And so you look at this customer and discover they're a wizard in their robes riding a unicorn and realize the specification has no provision for unicorn parking. There's no space for the customer/wizard to hitch their unicorn. You don't worry too much because you think this might just be a one-off until you see the opening day offer in the local paper has caused a tailback on the A41 because 200 unicorn riding wizards are all wandering around looking for somewhere to hitch their unicorns before tucking in to their tasty smoked salmon and cream cheese everything bagels. This may seem extreme, but actually having been doing this for nearly 30 years, this is exactly how I would describe the problem of commissioning software for non-technology founders and how product market fit eludes founders in their version 1 MVPs. It's not possible for you as a founder to know what to build before you commission a work, but the agency will behave as if it is. If left to their own devices, the agency will build whatever idea you have in your mind, whether it's good or bad, or whether it's ultimately going to land on a market or not. At this point, back to our analogy, you're going to have to find more money and some way of converting a chunk of the space used for parking cars into a chunk of space used for parking unicorns. And oftentimes founders don't have that spare money in order to fix the problems they find when people actually start using their MVPs. So how do we fix this? The answer is to operate the project in a far more experimental manner and to deliver the work in chunks, whilst having A, more flexible specification, and B, a more flexible way of managing the spend. The irony is that all outsourced agencies can do this, but none of them do this without explicit guidance and direction from the customer, i.e. you. Building software is like trying to land a space rocket on an asteroid. You have to keep measuring where you are and where the asteroid is and keep tweaking the heading so that you can neatly land on it as opposed to just firing for getting the rocket and hoping you land on it and discovering that 9 times out of 10 you don't. This is why outsourcing works better if you have a technologist within the business. They do this guidance part for you. Part of that is splitting the spend and project up into phases, which allows for a sort of a review, replan, ensure arrangement. By doing this, you get flexibility as to how the money is deployed. New features can be introduced. Features that are discovered to be less important when you're experimenting can be dropped as the project runs, i.e. you get flexibility. Anyway, back to our bagel drive-through. What we want to do is build a bit and then invite the customer to come down. We might clear the plot, ask the customer to pop down, discover that they're actually a wizard, discover that all the customers are going to be wizards, and explain to them how the final thing will work. And now that we know that our customers are wizards and they say, oh, where do I hitch my unicorn? We can now say, yeah, no, that's a good point. We're going to take half the car park and turn it into unicorn parking, because you're having those conversations that surface the real customer needs. Once you discover that what you're discovering through experimentation is not an aberration, and it turns out you're about to create the perfect bagel restaurant for wizards, then that unicorn parking now has to be part of your core offer. You can now go back to the outsourcing agency and modify the specification. If you do it right, you'll be able to land the project within the time constraints and within the budget constraints, but more importantly, on day one when you open, you're going to have spent the same amount of money and the same amount of time, but you'll actually have good product market fit. The phrase beta test is in common use these days, but did you know that it comes from a much older 3-part system of alpha test, beta test, and gamma test? The beta test we understand as a vendor saying, forgive us any problems that might be in this, i.e. the user knows the product is going to be a bit shonky and a bit ropey. The gamma test is somewhat tongue-in-cheek because it refers to an actual release. So the gamma test is the one that actually goes out to customers intended to be the final product. There's a little bit of comedy in there in that the developers are saying, lol, this might not work. The alpha test is the experimental part that we spoke about in the last section. It's where the product vaguely holds up to some use and we want to get it in front of customers to find out. The way to look at this is that with the alpha test, you're supposed to be in the driver's seat and the customer is watching. The beta test is the customer is supposed to be in the driver's seat but you're watching, and the gamma test is where the customer is off on their own but you might get the odd phone call or text message about an issue. The beta test comes at a point where we have something known as feature complete, and in the tech startup world, particularly in B2B or business to business offers, there is a special type of beta test called a pilot, and they're sufficiently important for me to make it the third act in this video. The intent of a pilot is that it's transformative, and what you're testing with the pilot is not the product, but instead the value that comes from using your product. And you're going to have to convince someone to shoehorn your unfinished product into a real workflow or real process. This sounds harder than practically is because most people are really generous with their time and attention, and most people are good at their jobs and are good leaders, are always looking for ways to improve what they do. And so when you pitch up with a piece of software that can help, they often will throw in and want to support you. Most people have scores of people in their contact list that could help them with pilot projects, and even if they don't have tons of them in their list, pilot customers are generally not that hard to find. The principle of a pilot is you're working hand in glove with the customer. Working closely with one of your potential customers on the pilot gives you rarefied access into how the product is actually being used. There is a major gotcha in the land of pilot projects, however, in that although the pilot project lets you laser focus in on the customer needs, most founders forget that the pilot project will present a bunch of learns. You will still be pre-revenue when you're doing the pilot, which means that the money you're paying the outsourcing agency to build your product is still coming from your own pocket and your own reserves. What I've seen happen way too often is that the founder runs a great pilot with their version 1 MVP, but then the work that needs to be done to roll the learns from the pilot into the product, the process required to get good product market fit, comes at a time when the money is run out. You can think of this like island hopping. You've flown the plane to pilot island, but you still need some fuel, i.e. money, to hop over to final release island. One, this is a reason to use one of my favorite video clips. They fully do not look like they're going to be able to stop that plane. But two, this comes down to sequencing and ties into the last section about how you need to break the spend with the outsourcer so that you retain some reactivity in how your complete solution is being delivered by not having a fixed specification and scope at the start. If you're asking me how much to hold in reserve, it's as how long is a piece of string question. I don't like those. So I will offer something. It's not 10%, it's not 50%. I would suggest you hold a third back. For example, if you've managed to find £75,000 on your first MVP, you might spend £50,000 on the work to deliver the pilot. And again, we're talking about having to split that up and experiment with customers as you go as well. You might break that up into 3 or 4 chunks. But then after the pilot project, you still have that last third, that £25,000, to get to where the pilot project told you that you needed to get to. Some YouTubers have sponsors, but I sponsor my own videos. So here's a message from me, my own sponsor. If you're a non-technology founder starting a technology business, I have a self-paced course on my website that takes you from the idea you have to getting a fully operational and profitable technology business startup. I'll show you in the course how to get your MVP built, how to find product market fit, how to get traction, and get from traction to either building your pitch deck and financials to get seed investment, or turning that traction into cash flow you need to get your startup to scale up. If you'd like to learn more, there's a link in the description, or just head to fractionalmatt.com/course. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.